Good morning, everyone. President, I'm very glad to be here talking to you about our research that we have been doing on the climate impact of the Nordic countries and Iceland as one of those countries that we have studied. A little provocatively, I've named my presentation as Affluence and the Climate Sustainability Illusion in the Nordics. And I will spend the next 20-25 minutes explaining why I wanted to name it this way, and then everybody can decide on their own opinion about it. The thing that we often hear about the Nordic countries going around the world and discussing with people is that we talk about the countries that are leading the transition, the green transition, and are appearing on top of all kinds of green country comparisons, sustainability comparisons, and such. This is one of the most well-known, widest recognized such comparisons. It's the Environmental Performance Index held by the Yale University annually, and this is the 2024 situation. Estonia is there on top, and then followed by Luxembourg, Germany, then Finland, then soon after Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and Iceland not very far behind after these countries. And on this bar chart here, you can see how they place among all the studied 180 countries. And this is the general impression around the world, that these are the countries that are doing a lot and have been doing a lot, and who have reached sort of a high level of sustainability, or at least are in such a comparison among the top countries. But there is one thing that often is kind of missed, is that this sort of means, if you look at the countries that form the top 10 and even the next best 10 countries in which Iceland also appears, we talk about the most affluent countries, and then they show us the greenest countries in the world. And that's the big question mark that we sort of need to understand, that it's not necessarily that straightforwardly like this. I'm not claiming that this would be very big news for everyone, but occasionally it also is quite a surprise when we take a little bit of a different perspective on the global environmental impacts that countries are causing, how then these most affluent countries end up placing. This nice gentleman here puts it in a very efficient way, what is kind of the mechanism that is behind the problem that I'm talking about today. And it is that there is basically no signs of any kind of satisfaction about any kind of sufficiency level that we would be satisfied with when we look at our nations globally. We only have some indigenous tribes somewhere that show lifestyles that follow this kind of a sufficiency principle or satisfaction with little. Everything else, our basic economic models everywhere that we nowadays follow, they are based on the idea of everyone aiming at reaching for higher and higher level of affluence, getting more and more of everything they can. It's kind of the way we show our place in the society, our value in the society. And as long as we follow this principle, it will be extremely difficult to find any kind of long-lasting solution that would allow us to live in peace with the nature, or even live so that everybody would have equal chances. And we have seen that development, even though, like we just heard, there has been tremendous development over the last 100 years, but there has also been tremendous development in terms of dividing the world into those who don't have the same opportunities than the more affluent part of the world. And now if we would think that we would bring all those less affluent across the world currently to the same level of affluence, same level of opportunities than what we have in our affluent corner of the world here in the Nordic countries, that would mean a complete disaster to the environment as it is now. So that's the problem that we need to overcome before we can say that we have somehow reached even some kind of an important level in this sort of sustainability quest. And along with that, in the fight against the climate change and biodiversity loss and so on. This description of Iceland in this environmental performance index, it sort of nicely shows how this is made possible. How it can be that the same countries who appear on right there in the top of these sustainability comparisons, also from a different perspective, potentially don't show us good when looking at their global impacts. We can see that I have highlighted some pieces. Very little particulate matter pollution in the air, very few heavy metal pollution, and Iceland is the only country of the 180 examined that has experienced zero habitat loss since 2001. So basically what we see here is that no local pollution and nothing about anything beyond the territory of Iceland. And then I don't know how they have chosen the year 2001, but you can imagine that if we took 1 zero out from it, if it was 201, can we say the same thing? Maybe not so much. Yes, please.
But zero habitat loss, what does it mean? Because we know that we have lost areas since 2001. But maybe then is it the...
I think that is like overall on a overall population level. Maybe there is then some regeneration somewhere that then allows them to say this. I don't know exactly, but it's more like I think it's more like for illustrative purposes that if you took 1 zero out from it, then you would need to think, has there been habitat loss or not? And even if you go 100 years back, then nobody could say this. I don't know exactly on what grounds they are able to say this here, but now if you look at the impact globally that a society is causing, then the picture might be quite different. We tend to focus on the within country borders issues, and of course it's understandable because that's what we can the most straightforwardly manage. But at the same time, it allows us, particularly in these most affluent countries, it allows us to push everything that we don't want to happen within our own country borders away from the territory of the country, and then anyway enjoy the benefits from that same production, which might even be cheaper for us to be imported from elsewhere if we don't want that to take place in our own backyards. And that typically has meant first that all kinds of most polluting industries, that they move away because we don't want them to take place nearby where we live when we are affluent enough to push them away. And then we are happy to import the products that we need, and at the same time, basically, we erase these emissions, erase these environmental impacts from our own bookkeeping, and globally still the emissions can either remain or even grow as the result of this action. And here is what we have calculated as the consumption-based carbon footprints for selected global countries, including the Nordic countries. And you can see that now the picture is somewhat different. Of course, it's again the highest bars where the Nordic countries are, but now the highest bar doesn't really demonstrate the best performance, but the opposite. And this shows that if we take into account the global impact, here the climate impact, but you can imagine that the same could be calculated for biodiversity or freshwater or whatever environmental aspect we want to look at, then the picture is quite different, because it's very difficult to imagine such a combination in which the most affluent would also be causing the lowest impact globally, regardless of what the impact is locally. And here you can see that it's Luxembourg, it's Iceland, Switzerland that were on the highest end, on the best performer end in the Environmental Performance Index, who now also have the highest global impact when we look at it from this perspective. And Iceland here places in between USA, Singapore, Australia, which are well-known high emission countries. And then you can see that it's Finland here, it's Denmark, it's Norway, and Sweden. Kind of sadly, always it makes me a little bit sad to say that Sweden is performing better than Finland, but again, in this they are. But gladly, it doesn't say that they would be performing well, because it's not a Nordic country comparison that matters. It's not a comparison to the worst in the world that matters, but it's a comparison to what would be a good enough level that we would be able to say that we are performing well. And now if we compare these bars into this against this kind of like climate sustainability threshold, in the sense that if we would be performing on this level or below it, then we could say that we would be on this IPCC pathway that is leading to a certain warming level. And then the pace of going down on that pathway would then define which warming level it is. But if we are above this level, then basically we would first need to catch that level and then follow the pathway, or otherwise we would be all the time contributing to higher emissions than any such pathway that starts from the current global emissions. If this is a fair share or not, that's another question, and a question for another day, but this means that we forget about the historic emissions. We don't take into account who has caused the emissions so far and who has actually led us to this climate situation that we are in. And if we took those into account, it might be that there would not be a global fair share left anymore for such affluent countries like the Nordic countries. But then if we accept that there would be some kind of a global fair share like this, and that we would be then that everybody would need to kind of follow the same pathway in the sense of giving equal budget to everyone right now, then what we can see is that for example, China, which has the highest global emissions by far nowadays of nations globally, it's one of those countries that appear below this global fair share level. And it shows very well the situation that I was talking about earlier. We can outsource our production elsewhere if we want to. We have countries across the globe that happily take that production and export it to us to the extent that we want it to be exported to us. And then global emissions remain or even increase while we erase those emissions away from our bookkeeping. If we zoom in to the emissions caused by each one of us by our own daily consumption activities, the previous one also included the public sector and capital goods. But if you look at the daily consumption of us as individuals, this is how the Nordic countries look like compared to the world average, and then to the sort of global fair share that I was showing in the previous slide. And then this shows how the global fair share goes down fast, because it's always a certain budget of emissions left for a certain warming level. And all the time when we cause more emissions, then we eat part of the budget away, and the budget shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. So this is how the emission development goes from today until 2030. And this is how the different Nordic countries place their, based on the private consumption of the individuals in these countries. So we can see that even on that level, we have quite a big gap between the current footprints and those levels that might be considered climate sustainable now or in the near future. And again, from this perspective, it's difficult to say that we would be among those most sustainable countries. And why is this? It's partially because we just can do so much. It's very difficult to make such choices with all the money that we have available, all the opportunities we have available, that we would actually be reaching these levels and go below them. We studied how climate concern affects these footprints. If people who are highly climate concerned, if they make choices that actually bring their emissions down in a significant manner, and we found across all the Nordic countries, you can see that it's Finland, Iceland, Sweden, Norway here, Denmark, and always divided into low climate concern, medium climate concern, high climate concern. And you can see that there is the same tendency in same pattern across all the countries, that the higher the climate concern, the lower the footprint. But again, if we add here the same global fair share, we can see that even the highest climate concern, the most climate concerned people, they remain quite far from this sort of climate sustainable level. And remembering that this is kind of the highest possible climate sustainable level, because it doesn't include the historic emissions, and immediately if it start including them, this goes down for the Nordic countries who have been causing high emissions globally for a long time. And now that we can see that none of these groups are reaching even very close to this climate sustainable level, we can also take a look into these footprints, and we can see that in Finland, for example, it's already diet and housing energy that are leading people to around on this level. And then what we have left is kind of all the money, all the affluence that we have generated as a society to do other stuff. So what should be the choices that lead us to actually reach this climate sustainable level? In Iceland, you can see that housing energy is basically almost causing no emissions at all. So yes, this leaves quite a lot of space for other things in life to cause these emissions to exceed this sort of climate sustainability threshold. But you can see again that we don't need to add more than just private vehicle use, and we are on that level or above. And then we can see that if we, for example, look at leisure travel, which is this blue squirt bar here, then we could either replace private cars with leisure travel emissions or abolish the leisure travel emissions, and then those with the highest concern levels would be reaching this threshold level, but not with both of them existing. And then there is all the rest of the consumption. One issue that potentially arises from this like a global overall image of these Nordic countries, that they would be these green transition leaders, and maybe in some extent they are, because they are anyway doing work towards that, but that they would have reached some kind of almost sustainable level. One potential explanation behind it is that we don't necessarily always very well understand what it means that we are able to do so much. We might be skipping one long distance trip and decide to fly a little bit less, to go somewhere more nearby, or we recycle and we say that yes, we are doing our share of the environmental protection, and then we sort of might accept that we do all else what we do just because we are doing something to reduce our own environmental impact. Or it might be the country itself. It might be that in Iceland many people feel like that, yes, we are already living in a very sustainable society, so it's not up to my own decisions. Here we studied how this kind of climate literacy shows in how people perceive their own footprints, their own level of climate sustainability, and then we compared that against their actual carbon footprints. And here you can see that on a very low level, or from the very low level through low and medium and high levels of climate sustainability perception, people's footprints are actually decreasing, quite significantly even. So people sort of understand when the perception is very low, their footprints are high, so they understand that their lifestyles are not very climate sustainable. and all the way up to high perception of climate sustainability, they sort of understand it. Of course, still, if you remember where the sort of threshold level was, it was 3.4 tons. So it's still like twice, even with the high climate sustainability perception group, but the emissions are anyway going down. But then there is a significantly big group. It's like 1/4 of all the respondents in this study of ours who perceived their own lifestyles as very highly climate sustainable. So the highest possible option that was available, and then suddenly their footprints are the second highest and significantly higher than those of this high group. So it means basically that we have a very important, very big group of people who think that they are living in a society that is providing them with opportunities to live a sustainable life as it is without them doing anything. And then it leads to this kind of a footprint that is not quite 3 times, but 2.5 times the climate sustainable level, if we accept it that is kind of the highest possible climate sustainable level. One thing that is behind all this is that we don't really understand well what money means in this equation. How money plays such an important role that we all the time kind of go wrong when we try to push people for more sustainable behavior, more climate sustainable, more environmental sustainable behavior, because it's so often sold to us with such promises that you save this much money or you can do something else when you choose to do this. And I'm showing an example for you what it means with when we drive or we don't drive, when we possess vehicles or we don't possess vehicles. And here, starting from this is the young residents, under 30 years old residents of Reykjavik, and their travel-related emissions, including all different modes of travel and all different distances. And here you can see how those who live in the most central areas, who possess the least vehicles, they end up with the highest emissions, which might be somewhat a surprise for somebody when thinking of what happens when people choose public transport, walk, cycle, don't possess vehicles. But in the end, it's a very natural, there is a causal link between not possessing vehicles, not driving, and then flying more. And then, of course, on top of that aspect of this, it's somewhat shocking that with this most mobile, most flying group, just this emission amount related to flying is more than the climate sustainability threshold that I was showing you earlier. How it can be and how there actually is a fairly strong causal link between these different modes of transport is that regardless that we are among the most affluent societies globally, still operating a vehicle is expensive. And what it means is that even though vehicles cause high emissions when operated, this is average vehicle-related carbon footprint in Finland. And when we think that if we give up on the vehicle, if we quit driving, if we sell the vehicle and don't possess it anymore at all, then that this would be the emission savings that then follow. But of course, there is the same money still available, and it's an important amount of money even in the most affluent countries. And what people do is not that they put it under their mattress. We have this same propensity to consume, meaning that different groups of people, regardless of if they possess vehicles or not, meaning that we end up spending the money we have available to spend, except for a small amount that we save or put into investment or something. So it appears that we suddenly have a big pile of money at hand that we can use on something else. But when we use it on something else, then of course it transfers the emissions from driving and cars to something else. And in this study of ours, we calculated first hypothetical options showing that, I'm going back. Yeah. So we showed that only in the option of like purposefully choosing low carbon services, the carbon savings would be important from giving up on a vehicle entirely, and choosing holiday travel, including not just the flights but everything else related to travels, which is one category where it inevitably is used to some extent. Then the so-called rebound effect can be more than 100% easily. And what this leads to is that it actually is quite a difficult equation to solve what would be the optimal solution when people are possessing vehicles. Because regardless that we think that gasoline is expensive, we complain about gasoline prices, but it's the smaller part of all the costs related to having vehicles. It's the capital cost and it's insurances and maintenance and so that is costing us more than the gasoline itself. So now if we take another option in which we don't give up on the vehicle, but we just quit driving it, then we are saving much less money than in the other option. But of course, the emissions go down almost as much because the emissions are anyway related to combustion to gasoline. And then, of course, the rebound effects are much smaller. So what this leads to next is, of course, that the best possible pro-climate action one can do is not to give up on a vehicle, but buy another one. Buy an expensive one, a used one that is not causing emissions when produced anymore, put it outside to disturb the neighbors, don't use it ever. Spend a lot of money on it, keep it clean, everything, have an expensive insurance for it. And you are not only reducing the emissions from your own driving, but you are reducing the emissions from everything else because you are choosing to put your money into the vehicle that you are not using. So you need to take the money away from something else. So now if I was invited to give advice for one of the governments of the Nordic countries on climate policies, I might not suggest this particular action. But anyway, this is a very good example of how complex it is to find ways to actually significantly reduce the emissions. In this same study, we next calculated the footprints across the households in Finland, dividing them into singles and couples and households with children because of their known differences in consumption habits. And then we divided them into those who don't possess vehicles, to those who possess vehicles but use them little, then sort of average drivers, and then like heavy drivers. And you can see that in both of these subgroups, it's not those who don't possess vehicles who have the lowest footprints, but those who possess vehicles but use them little. So it's not just a theoretical example, it works in real life as well. People spend the money that they save from gasoline on such activities that their lives become sort of more climate or greenhouse gas intensive than the lives of those who possess vehicles but don't use them much, because the vehicle itself is not that greenhouse gas intensive, but gasoline combustion is. We updated the study 24, and we found the same, that again, the lowest footprints are not among those who don't possess vehicles, but among those who possess them but drive the least. But we also found that these alternative power modes, electric vehicles and biofuels, they can lead to almost as good an outcome, which of course is somewhat promising. And that leads to such further thoughts that of course, like by improving this combustion stage performance of vehicles, then we could actually even allow people to use their vehicles to some extent. But the example is here for the purpose of showing how important it is to understand what money means in this equation of trying to find lifestyles that would be climate sustainable or beyond that, even like generally sustainable. We are often encouraged to make choices that have no sense in terms of the climate impact itself, with the idea of doing something that would be also a pro-climate action. This is I don't think that it exists anymore, but that this was on the way between Reykjavik and Keflavik Airport, where there is this car sales area. This was an advertisement outside one of them, which yeah, you can see what it asks. But then the question we can ask is how far you can fly before you reach the level of the same level that you were saving when making the original choice. I would say that potentially you can fly all the way down to Spain or otherwise Southern Europe. But if you choose to go to Thailand, for example, then definitely you are way above your old emissions already. Yeah, so we shouldn't look at savings through actions we do, and this should be the policy guideline we should follow. It's not the savings that are important, but actually it's where we put the money itself, and we should put the money into those activities that are not causing high emissions. Or we should make the activities that are causing high emissions, we should make them expensive enough so that per krona or per euro, the emissions would not be too much for the climate. Here we can see that making certain choices, making kind of wise choices in terms of the climate, it is possible to reach these climate sustainability thresholds even in the Nordic countries, and kind of encouragingly across the income groups in these countries. Here you can see across the 10 income deciles how choosing not to have cars, but not using the money on flights, but choosing other activities, which then often are those leisure services that have low intensities that you can improve your well-being with, but without leaving the country. Then suddenly you actually can reach these climate sustainability thresholds, or at least go close to them. Being a vegan or a vegetarian is one of the best options one can do, because it has a very important impact beyond climate change, and it's not really cheaper than not being a vegan. Being an omnivore is basically, it costs around the same amount, so it's one of the best options one can do. It improves one's own health and then also the global health. And then if one combines that with not having a vehicle, then again, one can be close to these levels. Of course, still it's possible to go way beyond it. It's up to the rest of the decisions we do in our lives. But this is like actual real life data from the Nordic countries, and the footprints that we calculated for people who don't possess vehicles and are vegans or vegetarians, and they tend to reach these thresholds, or at least go close to them. Yeah, so what we nowadays do and shouldn't do in the future is that we all the time talk about sustainability and development towards policies pushing development towards sustainability, but in reality we seek for further economic growth and somehow miraculously think that it converts into higher sustainability, whereas the history is of course exactly the opposite. And that's the dangerous thought we should get rid of. One encouraging aspect to end this talk is that more consumption doesn't really convert into more perceived or higher perceived well-being. This is the curves are people's perceived well-being. It's on the vertical axis is the perceived well-being score, and here on the horizontal axis is the footprint related to these categories that we looked at. Here is the total footprint, and then the same categories than what I was showing in on my previous slides. And you can see that that there is no really like the total perceived well-being is not going up with higher footprint, meaning that it's not going up with more consumption. Maybe as a little bit disappointing finding, we found that it is exactly the goods and services category and the leisure travel category where there is slight increase in the perceived well-being when people do that more, or when we buy more, when we travel more, we perceive higher well-being. But with nothing else, we could find such a connection. And with total footprint, you can see that with higher levels of footprint, it actually even starts to decline. So people have, maybe it's people who have too busy lives, they have difficult time spending all the money they have to spend, and it makes their lives difficult to try to find ways to use all of it. But anyway, we can definitely find ways to live good lives without it meaning all this material consumption that we nowadays think that our lives must have. And that's encouraging, and that's what our societies should be searching for or striving after. Along with this, I thank you, and I happily answer questions if you have such.